Hi everyone, how's it going? It is currently 1:30 a.m., which means it's a great time to talk about AI, specifically Perplexity. So one story that's been really popular lately is that Perplexity raised a $500 million funding round in mid-December, which gave them an official $9 billion valuation. That's more than triple what they were valued earlier. And a lot of people are wondering, why does this make sense for a company like Perplexity? What are they even doing that's worth $9 billion? Currently, there's a few big names in AI that every VC seems to be supporting and rallying around. There's OpenAI, obviously, there's Anthropic, there's Cohere, and with this funding round and valuation, Perplexity has definitely cemented its position among these companies, despite the fact that they're not actually building any models, foundational models themselves. And one thing is that, when you see a very high growth sector like AI that's been super popular over the past few years, it's easy to lose perspective on these figures. So with $9 billion, if you take a step back and think about that on the public market, $9 billion would be, top level mid cap stock, very nearly a large cap. Um, so I think it is important to take a step back. As cool as it is to throw billions of dollars at very exciting high growth tech, I think it's important to take a step back and look objectively at these valuations to see if they make sense, and what does it mean for everyone if it doesn't make sense. Some people suspect that AI is a bubble. Databricks has been postponing their IPO because they fear that an AI winter is about to start and they don't want to IPO right when this happens, while others think that we're currently in, the 1999 internet era where this is just starting to take off and growth is only going to get more accelerated. Um, so let's think about it. And I want to give my thoughts in this video. I want to talk about, do I think Perplexity is worth $9 billion? And if not, what can they do to justify it and meet the very high investor expectations that have been set with this latest funding round. So to start off, here's the key point to remember. Perplexity is the only real company that's had a chance to challenge Google in a long time. It's basically trying to do to Google right now what Google did to Yahoo in the early 2000s, like late 90s. Google's had a pretty dominant monopoly over search for over 15 years now, but recently people have gotten pretty disappointed with the quality of Google search. You might have noticed this yourself, or you might have read about this online. One fun example that exemplifies this trend is with Reddit. So many people are adding Reddit to the end of their searches to get more organic, natural opinions on issues that Reddit's stock actually 4x'd in under a year since it's been public. It's not entirely because of this, but you can notice that Google's even started integrating this into their own search algorithm, where if you look up a product, Reddit results are going to return naturally by themselves. So, and I think Perplexity, they've noticed that people are disappointed with search, um, and they see this as an opening, as a great opportunity to actually, take a jab at Google's search dominance. Um, so let's take a look at what Perplexity is, some actual numbers rather than just narratives. So Perplexity is a search engine. Supposedly they crawl the web and generate their own knowledge base and then apply large language models like ChatGPT and Claude to integrate this data and serve it to people in a useful way. It's supposed to be like higher quality, unbiased search with no ads. Their business model is a freemium model where anyone can use it for free, but there's limits on like how much you can search. And for $20 a month, you can get unlimited searches, supposedly higher quality results, etc. So let's get into some numbers. Let's treat this like a business or finance major would to get an objective perspective. So they currently have between 10 to 15 million active users, which generates around 45 to 55 million queries per month. It's hard to get an actual forecast for their CAGR just because of, they're private, it's very high growth, but I'm assuming most VCs will put it above 50 or 60%. For their Pro version, they report 500,000 Pro subscriptions, like at a $20 per month, so $240 annually times 500,000. That gives them a revenue of somewhere between 100 million to 150 million dollars. And given their valuation of 9 billion right now, that's a revenue multiple of 75, between 60 and 75, which is very, very high, even for a high growth sector like AI right now. Um, Usually, some people can try to justify this by saying that funding typically precedes revenue growth. So even companies like Nvidia and Databricks, I think at some point were above 60 revenue multiple. 75 is really high. You never want to look at DCF, discounted cash flow, on an early stage tech company like Perplexity. So the revenue multiple is more of a useful metric here. But financials aside, so yeah, these are the financials. They're obviously getting great traction. It's growing, but they're still valued very highly. But I think that the main argument that people try to use and to justify, um, now I'm trying to think like a VC. I think that the main argument that a VC would use to justify this valuation is just the point of how much revenue Google is getting from search alone. And they're betting that if a company like Perplexity can even get somewhere from 2 to 5% of Google's stake, which no one's been able to do amazingly over the past 15 years. Perplexity can even take 2 to 5% of Google's $175 billion annual search revenue. At 2%, that's 3.5 billion. At 5%, that's nearly 9 billion. And then if you apply a more reasonable revenue multiple, like 20, you can see what type of valuation you're getting at. So this is somewhere between 70 to 180 billion. And I think that's the main narrative that's really inspiring Perplexity's valuation. So if you agree with this narrative, then yes, 9 billion is probably a fair bet um, for for them. Obviously, there's a lot of high expectations, and a lot of people do agree with this. I think it makes sense if they're able to accomplish this, but it's not going to happen quickly. It's going to take a long time for them to eat away at Google's share, and obviously Google's been defensive. They've integrated LLM responses into their own search. But I think one key point that Perplexity and other people that are trying to value the company are missing is that the business model, I don't know if it's going to be sustainable to get them to that point where they're going to start taking away Google's revenue. Um, so let me talk a bit about what I mean. I think there's not that I think, I mean, there's two real ways for search to be profitable. The gold standard has been advertising. Google's pay per click has been the gold standard. But Perplexity is in a weird position where they can't do ads. They can't use advertising for their business model because that's their whole business is getting like higher quality search with no ads. So that's out of the picture. What they're doing with their freemium model has kind of been their approach, but I think they're missing a key point, which would be smarter than a freemium approach, in my opinion. I think with search, another way to make search profitable is with price discovery. So when you have a comprehensive search that understands pricing, either in a specific vertical or across the web, that's very powerful and directly monetizable. But price discovery at mass scale is pretty optimistic, even when you have $500 million in funding and some of the top engineers from like Berkeley and Stanford. That's why in the past, when you think about price discovery, a good way to explain this to someone is looking at sites like Expedia, Indeed, different search engines for clothes. I don't whichever one that might be. I'm blanking right now. But if you're like an expert on one specific vertical, you have the best products and you have the best knowledge of pricing for that product. People are going to come to your site just to look for that. And that's powerful because you know that market, and anyone who's selling products in that market will have to go through you if they want to sell their product. It's kind of like when you go to a grocery store. All the things that you see on the shelves, they're there for a reason. They're there because the company that's making those things is paying the grocery store. They're paying Walmart or they're paying Costco. Maybe not Costco. I mean, they're paying the grocery store to place their products. That's why something when it's top shelf, it's because they paid the most money for it to be in the top shelf where everyone can see it. So with search, if you establish yourself as like an expert on one vertical to the point where people are gonna come to you for that, I think that's something that Perplexity hasn't been doing. They've been trying to go for the more generalized search approach. Um, and their freemium model, no one knows what Perplexity's per user cost is. It's not public knowledge, but you can imagine that crawling the internet and serving LLM inference at scale, even though they're not building the models or hosting them themselves, that's very costly. I'm not entirely sure that $20 a month per user is going to cover that. So in a sense, they might actually need this $500 million funding round just for their operating costs. Um, and although it's like well known that ads scale way better for profitability than a freemium model. Otherwise, Google would have been doing this all along, um, but they didn't, and Perplexity can't do that. So to conclude, yeah, I kind of missed these other tabs, but I mean, I think you're all familiar with how expensive it is to run something like ChatGPT. Um, so to conclude, I do think that Perplexity's speculative valuation is justified when you look at the nonlinear payoffs in tech and the fact that they're the main challenger to Google, the only challenger that's really gaining some traction and popularity. I think their valuation makes more sense if you think about it that way than ChatGPT's $160 billion even. I think that's even more overvalued. But the problem isn't its $9 billion valuation. That's fine. I think the problem is that their business, like Perplexity is missing a key point that would position them better than a freemium model. That would be being an expert in specific verticals, kind of where people would have to use your search to find products online in a specific vertical, whether that be like electronics, jobs, travel, cars. Um, and if they're the leaders in price discovery there, that'd be, I think, that'd be a way more powerful value proposition than just like a better alternative to search. I mean, you know what I mean. Um, but it's not too late. They're still early. They're still a nimble startup. Like it's not something that it's too late for them to implement. And I just want to clarify that I am a big fan of what Perplexity is trying to do. I do like their product a lot. It's something that I use, and I really do hope it works out for them. It would be nice to get an alternative to Google to use. And in any case, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this technology plays out. So with that said, I should probably go to bed, but thank you for watching. All right, sorry, I realized that I should clarify two things that I said in the video so that I don't look stupid. Um, Reddit's stock did not 4x, it close to 4x, something like 3.5 times. And the other thing is I said that a 20x revenue multiple was reasonable. That's not reasonable. Nvidia's at 30, but like still, even if you put it something lower at like 10 or 5, the point still stands, but just thought I'd clarify.